Soviet military intervention in other countries is now over.
Well, I told you.
Huh? Told me what?
All we had to do, shoot down the helicopters.
Listen, not for nothing, but do you know the story about the Zen Master and the little boy?
Oh, is this something from Nitsa, the Greek witch of Aquilippa, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it is. There's a little boy, and on his 14th birthday, he gets a horse. And everybody in the village says, how wonderful, the boy got a horse. And the Zen Master says, we'll see. 2 years later, the boy falls off the horse, breaks his leg, and everybody in the village says, how terrible. And the Zen Master says, we'll see. Then a war breaks out, and all the young men have to go off and fight, except the boy can't because his leg's all messed up. And everybody in the village says, how wonderful.
And the Zen Master says, we'll see.
So you get it.
No, because I'm stupid.
You're not stupid. You're just in Congress.
Boker Tov, everyone, and welcome to Taste of Torah. This week, our Torah portion is Vayigash. It is the central and pivotal element of the Joseph saga, where we see he and his brothers reconciled, and we see their next transition to live in the land of Egypt. And it sets up everything that's going to happen in Exodus. And I'm showing you that clip from Charlie Wilson's War for one of the most elemental big ideas that appears in our Torah portion. Clearly, Gus is talking to Charlie about the end result of success, having won in Afghanistan, and Gus makes the point that we may celebrate our success now, but we don't fully understand the consequences of our actions. We don't know how they're all going to play out in the future. And that's really what's going on in our Torah portion. Joseph, in talking to his brothers, says, you meant what you did for evil, but God meant it for good. And as a result, you have come to the land of Egypt, and I am going to save you in a way that wouldn't have been possible if none of that had happened. So like the Zen Master, Joseph has a bigger picture of history, recognizing that what we see in front of us is not always the whole picture. And that's a very important lesson for all of us. It teaches us a certain humility about our successes, and hopefully a little bit of confidence and hope about our failures. Who knows what may come out of this in the end? History is cumulative, and we don't always understand how it's going to accumulate in the future. So that's the first big lesson. But let me go back, take a step back, and talk about what's going on in our Torah portion. Well, the first thing that goes on is that Joseph has been psychologically tormenting his brothers, and it seems a little sadistic. He knows who they are and what they've done. They do not know who he is, but it culminates in a very, very important moment when one of the brothers, Judah, the fourth of the brothers, much older than Joseph, but also the one who had a little tinge of conscience at the time that they sent Joseph off into slavery, basically gives one of the longest speeches found in the entire book of Genesis, in which he talks about their situation. He talks about the things that have gone wrong, how the brothers have misbehaved, but how they also love their family. They are concerned for their youngest brother, Benjamin. They are concerned for their father. And therefore, he basically offers himself as a slave to Joseph, because he believes that this may be sort of a kind of karmic event, that he is receiving his punishment for his past errors. And the brothers in general are humbled and ashamed of what they've done. And this is the moment when Joseph finally calls off the charade, stops the manipulative things that he's been doing, and says, I am Joseph, your brother. He bursts into tears. And of course, the brothers are dumbfounded. and cannot believe. And of course, there's immediate fear. This very powerful man they've been talking to, someone who seemed to be like an anonymous confessor for which they could talk about the things they've done wrong, suddenly holds the sword over their head. But it becomes immediately clear Joseph does not want to harm them. What he wants is reconciliation. And the news of this reaches Pharaoh. Pharaoh, because of for the sake of Joseph, wants to welcome the brothers into the land of Egypt. And in fact, Joseph sends all the brothers back to bring back the entire clan to settle in the land in a place called Goshen, somewhere on the delta of the Nile, which is apparently very productive and valuable land. And they are saved. What looked to be a terrible disintegration of the family, in fact, turns out to be its redemption. We'll see. It's temporary, of course, and we know as the readers that things are going to go south within a couple of generations. So we are reminded again and again that we don't understand all the mechanisms of history and providence and God's intention. So that's one of the very, very big ideas there. And there are a couple of other big ideas going on in our Torah portion. There's the idea that Jews have to take moral responsibility. That's why we have our tradition of what's called cheshbon nefesh, accounting of the soul, that we should be on a regular basis taking a kind of moral inventory of ourselves to look at what we're doing. No human being gets it right all the time. No human being is always in the right as much as our imagination allows us to think we are. We all make mistakes. We all end up doing some immoral act. We all fail to be our highest self at different points. But if we're willing to take responsibility for that, then there is the possibility of redemption. There's the possibility of reconciliation. There's the possibility of a more hopeful future. So that's an incredibly important idea in Jewish tradition. Of course, it's the basis for Yom Kippur. The Bible actually doesn't describe Yom Kippur as a day of seeking atonement and forgiveness, but rather it is simply some kind of self-afflicting holiday. And we have turned it into this extraordinary day in which we really do a almost global self-assessment of ourselves. And I think we are all the better for it. Other big ideas include not only those things, but the importance of forgiveness itself, that sometimes it's not that we do things wrong, but that wrong things are done to us. Therefore, we have an obligation to grant forgiveness to those who are trying to resolve their past errors and to reconcile with us. Now, that's very hard. We can be harsh and brutal to each other, and no more is that true than in families. Sometimes families do things to us that are very hard, maybe potentially impossible to forgive. And we need to recognize the scope of the damage that we've suffered, but we also have an opportunity through forgiveness to make things better. Now, Joseph certainly was entitled to take his revenge on his brothers for the insanely cruel thing they did to him, but he chooses not to. And at the end, I think he did it as much for his own benefit as for theirs. By forgiving, he is able to reclaim his family and to recover that lost part of himself that's been missing for 20 years. We can't always find a place for forgiveness, but we should strive for it at all times. And then finally, I think the last important lesson in here, because as I like to say, the Torah is never coy. It always presents us not with a series of saints and heroes, but with really pretty genuine characterizations of real people with real flaws and real limitations, is that we have an obligation to remember everything, the bad as well as the good. Forgiveness doesn't require us. We like to say in English, forgive and forget, but we never forget. And actually, we shouldn't. Sometimes the things we have done wrong in the past are better teachers for us than the things we got right. Sometimes our right decisions are almost serendipitous, and there's no necessarily any way that we can replicate them. But the things that we do wrong, we can weigh that against future decisions, and we can see maybe where we went wrong and how to prevent that from happening in the future. In some ways, as far as our societies goes, this is one of the most relevant discussions we're having right now. People are embarrassed and feel awkward about some aspects of the American past, how we treated the first Americans, the history of slavery, different kinds of racism that we know permeated American communities since our founding. And there is a segment of us who simply don't want to talk about that. We want only the heroic past. We want only the virtuous American story. But I think we short shrift ourselves when we do that. The genius of the Hebrew Bible is that it refuses to whitewash the past. It tells us all the things that went wrong, all the things that we've done wrong, all the things that our ancestors did that we may in retrospect view as terrible or uncomfortable or shameful. But the Torah insists that we know them, because if we know them, then we have the ability to perhaps not replicate them in the future. So the Torah teaches us that we have to remember the mistakes we made, the crimes that were committed, along with the virtuous and glorious things that have happened. And our Torah portion this week gives us both. It gives us both great examples of humanity, of caring, of compassion and forgiveness, but it also reminds us that terrible things are part of our past also. And what can we do to not have those things be part of our future? Well, that's it for our Torah portion this week. I hope you all have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you again next week.